The morning sun cast long shadows across Detroit's east side, but 12-year-old Amara Johnson had learned that shadows offered little protection from the harsh realities of life. She crouched beside her mother, Denise, who sat on a piece of cardboard near the entrance to a grocery store, mumbling incoherently to herself while staring at something only she could see. "Move along, girl. This ain't no camping ground," barked the store manager, his voice cutting through the morning air like a blade. Amara tightened her grip on her mother's trembling hand. Denise had been beautiful once, or so Amara imagined from the one faded photograph she kept hidden in her pocket. But mental illness had stolen that beauty, leaving behind a hollow shell of a woman who sometimes forgot her own daughter's name. "Mama, we need to go," Amara whispered gently, helping her mother to her feet. They had no father to speak of, no family to turn to, no home to call their own. Their world consisted of bus stops, park benches, and the occasional kindness of strangers who dropped spare change into Denise's outstretched palm. Amara had attended school sporadically, 3 weeks here, a month there, whenever someone took pity on them. But consistency was a luxury they couldn't afford. Her last benefactor, Mrs. Washington, had moved to Atlanta 6 months ago, taking with her Amara's only chance at regular education. As they walked away from the store, Amara noticed a group of children her age waiting for the school bus, their backpacks neat, their clothes clean, their futures seemingly assured. She pressed her lips together, swallowing the familiar ache of longing that rose in her throat. "One day," she whispered to herself, the same prayer she'd been carrying for years. "One day, I'll sit in a real classroom again." Desperate times called for desperate measures. Amara had watched other kids selling bottled water at traffic lights and decided to try her luck. Mrs. Rodriguez at the corner store had agreed to let her take a case of water bottles on credit, with the warning that every broken bottle would come out of her meager earnings. The summer heat was unforgiving, as Amara balanced the heavy case on her small frame, weaving between cars at red lights. Her bare feet burned against the hot asphalt, but she pushed forward. Each bottle sold for $2, and after paying back Mrs. Rodriguez, she'd have enough to buy her mother a decent meal. "Water! Cold water!" she called out, her voice barely audible over the traffic. Some drivers ignored her completely. Others rolled down their windows just to tell her to get a job, as if a 12-year-old homeless girl had abundant career options. But occasionally, someone would hand her a crumpled bill and take a bottle, sometimes keeping the change. One particularly brutal afternoon, a businessman in a Mercedes handed her a $20 bill. "Keep it, kid," he said, before driving away. Amara stared at the money in disbelief. It was more than she usually made in a week. But as she turned to head back to her mother, a teenage boy snatched the bill from her hand and sprinted into the crowd. "Hey, that's mine!" Amara screamed, giving chase, but he vanished into the maze of downtown Detroit. She sat on the curb and cried until her tears ran dry. When she finally made it back to where she'd left her mother, Denise was gone. Panic seized Amara's chest as she searched frantically, finally finding her mother 3 blocks away, having an animated conversation with a fire hydrant. "Mama, I'm here," Amara said softly, taking her mother's hand. Denise looked at her with vacant eyes. "Do I know you? You look like my daughter, but she's made of starlight and lives in the sky." Amara's heart broke a little more, but she simply nodded and led her mother to their usual sleeping spot under an abandoned overpass. Amara couldn't stay away from schools, no matter how many times she was chased off. There was something magnetic about the sound of children learning, the sight of teachers writing on whiteboards, the promise of knowledge that seemed to dance just beyond her reach. Riverside Academy was different from the public schools she'd haunted before. Its red brick buildings were pristine, its windows gleamed, and the students who walked its halls wore uniforms that cost more than most families spent on groceries in a month. It was a world apart from her reality, but that didn't stop her from finding ways to peer inside. She discovered a gap in the fence behind the school, near where the maintenance shed blocked the view from the main building. From there, she could see into several classrooms. She'd crouch in the tall grass, listening to math lessons and English classes, scribbling notes on scraps of paper she'd found in dumpsters. The first time a teacher spotted her, The woman screamed as if she'd seen a ghost. "Security! There's a vagrant child outside classroom 3B. Amara ran before anyone could catch her, her heart pounding with shame and fear. But the next day she was back, choosing a different vantage point. "Why do you keep coming here?" a security guard asked one afternoon, cornering her behind the gymnasium. His voice wasn't angry, just curious. "I want to learn," Amara said quietly. The guard, a middle-aged black man named Mr. Collins, studied her for a long moment. "You can't learn much from out here, child. You need to be inside, at a desk, with books." "Nobody wants me inside," Amara replied. "I'm the crazy woman's daughter. I don't belong anywhere." Mr. Collins's expression softened. "Every child belongs somewhere, little sister. The trick is finding where that somewhere is." He didn't chase her away that day, but he didn't invite her in either. The unspoken understanding hung between them. She could stay, but she had to remain invisible. Emma Whitmore had never questioned her place in the world. At 12 years old, she was the daughter of tech billionaire David Whitmore, a man whose innovations had revolutionized 3 different industries. She attended the finest private school, lived in a mansion that overlooked Lake Huron, and had never wanted for anything material. But Emma had a secret that no amount of money could fix. She was struggling in school. Despite having access to the best tutors money could buy, she couldn't seem to grasp concepts that came naturally to her classmates. Math was a mystery, literature felt like a foreign language, and science might as well have been magic. Her teachers praised her effort while her father hired increasingly expensive educational specialists. Nothing helped. Emma felt stupid, worthless, like a disappointment to a man who had built an empire on intelligence and innovation. On this particular Tuesday, Emma had skipped lunch to hide behind the school building, tears streaming down her face after receiving yet another failing grade. She didn't want her classmates to see her cry, didn't want to answer questions about why the rich girl couldn't pass a simple history test. That's when she heard a voice, soft but clear, coming from somewhere in the tall grass beyond the fence. "The Boston Tea Party happened in 1773, not 1774, the voice said. "The teacher got it wrong." Emma wiped her eyes and looked around, confused. "Who's there?" A small black girl emerged from the grass, her clothes worn and dirty, her hair tied back with what looked like a piece of string. She had the brightest, most intelligent eyes Emma had ever seen. "You were crying," the girl observed. "About the history test?" Emma nodded, too surprised to speak. "I heard your teacher from out here," the girl continued. "She said the Tea Party was a response to the Tea Act of 1773, but she dated the event wrong. It happened the same year as the act, not the following year." Emma blinked. "How do you know that?" The girl shrugged. "I listen to the lessons. I remember things. But you don't go to school here, do you?" "No," the girl said quietly. "I don't go to school anywhere. I'm Amara." "Emma," she replied, then asked the question that had been burning in her mind. "If you don't go to school, how are you so smart?" Amara sat down in the grass, and after a moment's hesitation, Emma joined her on the ground, not caring that her uniform would get dirty. "I listen," Amara said simply. "I watch, I remember. My mama used to sing me songs with numbers in them, back when she was different. And I had a teacher once for a few weeks who told me that learning is like breathing. You do it whether anyone's watching or not." Emma stared at this strange girl who spoke with more wisdom than most adults she knew. Would you help me? With school, I mean. I can pay you." Amara shook her head. "I don't want money, but I'll help you if you want me to." And so began the most unlikely friendship either girl had ever known. They met every day during lunch period under the ancient oak tree that grew just outside the school fence. Emma would bring her textbooks and her lunch, while Amara brought her keen mind and patient teaching style. "Don't just memorize the formula," Amara would explain, sketching equations in the dirt with a stick. "Understand why it works. Math is just another language, and like any language, it follows patterns." Within weeks, Emma's grades began to improve, but more importantly, her confidence grew. She started participating in class discussions, asking questions without fear of sounding stupid, and for the first time in her academic life, She felt like she might actually be smart. In return, Emma shared her lunch with Amara, though she quickly learned to be discreet about it. The sandwiches were gourmet affairs prepared by the family's chef, and Emma noticed how carefully Amara ate them, savoring every bite as if it might be her last meal. "Why don't you come to school here?" Emma asked one day. "My dad could pay for it, he's really rich." Amara was quiet for a long moment. "Rich people's kids and poor people's kids don't mix, Emma. It's not how the world works." "That's stupid," Emma declared, with all the righteous indignation a 12-year-old could muster. "Maybe," Amara agreed, "but it's still true." Their friendship deepened with each passing day. Emma learned about Amara's mother, about their life on the streets, about the dreams that seemed impossible from where Amara stood. Amara learned about Emma's loneliness, about the pressure of living up to a brilliant father's expectations, about how money couldn't buy the things that mattered most. "You're the best teacher I've ever had," Emma told her one afternoon. "Better than all the expensive tutors combined." Amara smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "You're my first real friend." "What about at your old schools?" "I was never anywhere long enough to make friends, and besides, nobody wanted to be friends with the crazy lady's daughter." Emma's jaw tightened with anger. "Your mother isn't crazy. She's sick. There's a difference." It was the first time anyone had ever defended Amara's mother, and the gesture brought tears to Amara's eyes. David Whitmore prided himself on knowing everything that mattered in his daughter's life. He knew her grades were improving dramatically, knew she was happier than she'd been in years, knew she looked forward to school in a way she never had before. What he didn't know was why. His curiosity was piqued when Emma's language arts teacher called to praise her recent essay on social inequality, a topic his daughter had never shown interest in before, and certainly not with such insight and empathy. "She's like a different child," the teacher had said. "More engaged, more thoughtful. Whatever you're doing at home, keep it up." But David wasn't doing anything different at home. If anything, he'd been busier than usual with a new acquisition. So where was this transformation coming from? His question was answered on a Thursday afternoon when he decided to surprise Emma with a visit to school. He'd brought her favorite pastries from the bakery downtown and planned to take her to lunch. But as he parked his Tesla in the school lot, he noticed something unusual. There, beyond the fence at the edge of school property, sat his daughter under an oak tree with a small black girl he didn't recognize. The unknown child was pointing at something in Emma's textbook, explaining something with animated hand gestures while Emma listened intently. David's first instinct was protective concern. Who was this child, and why was she with his daughter? But as he watched, he realized what he was witnessing. Emma was being tutored, and she was engaged in a way he'd never seen before. He approached quietly, not wanting to interrupt, but needing to understand what was happening. "So you see, the author isn't just telling a story about a whale," he heard the black girl saying. "Moby Dick represents obsession, the thing that destroys Captain Ahab because he can't let it go." Emma nodded eagerly. "Like when my dad talks about his competitors. He gets that same look in his eyes." David paused, taken aback by his daughter's insight. When had she become so perceptive? "Who are you?" he called out, stepping closer to the fence. Both girls froze. Emma's face went pale while the other child, Amara, he would later learn, looked like she wanted to disappear into the ground. "Daddy?" Emma stammered, jumping to her feet. "I can explain." "I should hope so," David replied, his voice stern but not angry. He was more curious than upset. "And you," he said, addressing Amara. "What's your name?" Amara looked like she might be sick. "I'm sorry, sir. I wasn't trying to cause trouble. I'll go." "Wait," David said, his tone gentler. "I'm not angry. I just want to understand. Are you the reason my daughter's grades have improved so dramatically?" Amara nodded hesitantly. "And you don't attend school here?" "I don't attend school anywhere, sir." David studied the girl more closely. She was clearly intelligent, articulate, and despite her worn clothes and unkempt appearance, she carried herself with dignity. "Why not?" "Because I'm homeless, sir. My mother and I live on the streets. We don't have money for school fees or uniforms or books." The brutal honesty of the statement hit David like a physical blow. Here was a child with obvious intellectual gifts, wasting away in poverty while his own daughter, who had access to every educational advantage, had been struggling until this unlikely teacher appeared. "Where is your mother now?" he asked. "Downtown, sir. She's not well, in her mind, I mean." David made a decision that would change 3 lives forever. "Show me," he said. The ride downtown was awkward, with Emma holding Amara's hand in the back seat of David's Tesla, while Amara gave directions in a voice barely above a whisper. David's driver navigated through increasingly rough neighborhoods until they reached an area where hope seemed to have been abandoned, along with the buildings. They found Denise Johnson sitting on a piece of cardboard outside a boarded-up storefront, having an animated conversation with no one. She was thin to the point of gauntness, her hair matted, her clothes barely holding together. But David could see traces of the beauty she must have possessed once upon a time. "Mama," Amara said gently, kneeling beside her mother, "I brought some people to meet you." Denise looked up at her daughter with eyes that seemed to see through multiple dimensions of reality at once. "The angels are here," she said, reaching out to touch Amara's face. "They told me you would come with the light people." David knelt down as well, his expensive suit touching the dirty pavement without hesitation. "Ma'am, I'm David Whitmore. This is my daughter Emma. Your daughter Amara has been helping Emma with her studies." Denise's gaze shifted to David, and for a moment, her eyes seemed to clear. "My Amara is smart," she said with sudden lucidity. "Smarter than all of them. But they don't see it because we live in the shadows." "I see it," David said simply. "And I'd like to help." Denise laughed, but there was no joy in the sound. "Help? You want to help? Take her. Take my baby and give her the life I can't. I'm nothing but a burden, a crazy woman who can't even remember her own name some days." Tears ran down Amara's cheeks. "Mama, don't say that." David looked at this broken family, a brilliant child and her mentally ill mother, victims of a system that had failed them at every turn. He thought of his own daughter, who had everything but had been struggling until this homeless girl became her teacher. "What if I told you there was another way?" he said quietly. "What if I told you that both of you could be helped?" Denise stared at him with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Rich men don't help people like us." "This one does," David replied. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but David Whitmore was a man accustomed to solving complex problems quickly and thoroughly. Within 48 hours, he had Denise Johnson admitted to the finest private psychiatric facility in the state, where Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a renowned specialist in treatment-resistant mental illness, took on her case personally. "Her condition is severe," Dr. Mitchell explained to David and Amara during their first meeting. "Years of trauma, probably untreated bipolar disorder with psychotic features, complicated by malnutrition and chronic stress. But she's not beyond help. With the right medication, therapy, and time, we can stabilize her condition significantly." Amara listened with hope and fear warring in her chest. "Will she remember me?" Dr. Mitchell's expression softened. "Some days will be better than others, but with treatment, those good days should become more frequent and more consistent." Meanwhile, David had arranged for Amara to stay at his estate. The mansion seemed impossibly vast to a girl who had spent her life in spaces measured in square feet rather than thousands of square feet. Emma had insisted that Amara share her room, at least initially, and David had agreed. "This is bigger than some of the buildings I've slept in," Amara marveled, standing in the center of Emma's bedroom. "It's our room now," Emma corrected, "for as long as you want it to be." The household staff had been briefed to treat Amara as they would Emma, with respect, kindness, and without condescension. David had made it clear that anyone who had a problem with this arrangement could find employment elsewhere. There were no takers on that offer. Amara's first shower in a proper bathroom lasted 45 minutes. When she emerged, Emma had laid out clothes for her. Simple jeans and a sweater, nothing fancy but clean and new and properly fitted. Looking in the mirror, Amara barely recognized herself. That evening, David sat both girls down in his study. "Amara," he began, I want you to understand that this isn't charity. Emma's grades have improved more in the past month than in the entire previous year. You're not just a student here, you're a teacher, and good teachers are valuable. Amara nodded, though she still seemed overwhelmed by everything that had happened. Emma, he continued, I want you to understand how fortunate you are to have found such a friend. True friendship isn't about money or status. It's about people who see the best in each other and help bring it out. Emma reached over and took Amara's hand. I know, Daddy. Amara taught me that. Monday morning brought a new kind of nervousness for both girls. Emma had attended Riverside Academy since kindergarten, but walking through the front doors with Amara felt like entering a completely different world. David had taken care of the administrative details over the weekend. Amara's test scores had been extraordinary. She was reading at a high school level, and her mathematical aptitude was off the charts. The school's admissions committee, no doubt influenced by David's substantial donations over the years, had fast-tracked her acceptance. Still, the stares and whispers followed them down the hallways. At Riverside Academy, diversity was encouraged in theory but rarely seen in practice. Most of the students of color came from well-established wealthy families. A formerly homeless girl was unprecedented. Just ignore them, Emma whispered as they made their way to first period. But Amara wasn't ignoring anything. She was observing, analyzing, cataloging the reactions around her. Some students looked curious, others uncomfortable, a few openly hostile. She'd faced worse. Their first class was advanced mathematics with Mr. Peterson, a stern man who was known for his no-nonsense approach to teaching. He looked up as the girls entered. Miss Whitmore, I assume this is our new student, he said, consulting his roster. Amara Johnson. Yes, sir, Amara replied quietly. Well then, Miss Johnson, let's see what you can do. Can you solve this equation? He turned to the whiteboard and wrote out a complex algebraic problem that was meant to be challenging for high school students, let alone a 12-year-old who had never attended a proper math class. The classroom fell silent. Even Emma held her breath, worried that her friend was being set up to fail. Amara studied the problem for less than 30 seconds before raising her hand. The answer is x equals -7/3, sir. Mr. Peterson blinked, clearly not having expected a correct answer, let alone such a quick one. He worked through the problem himself, double-checking his arithmetic. The answer was indeed -7/3. Very good, he said, though he seemed more puzzled than pleased. How did you arrive at that so quickly? I can see the pattern, sir. Once you factor out the common elements, the solution becomes clearer. For the first time in his 20-year career, Mr. Peterson was speechless. Word of the new girl's mathematical prowess spread quickly through the school. By lunchtime, teachers were stopping by classes just to see the homeless prodigy who was solving problems that stumped students 3 years older than her. But Amara's favorite part of the day remained lunch period, when she and Emma would sit under their oak tree, now officially on school property since Amara was enrolled. Are you happy? Emma asked one afternoon as they shared a sandwich from the school cafeteria. Amara considered the question seriously. I'm grateful, she said finally, and hopeful, but happy. I'll be happy when my mama is well enough to understand that her daughter has a real home now. Emma nodded. She was learning that happiness and gratitude weren't always the same thing, and that sometimes the most important gifts took time to fully unwrap. Dr. Mitchell had recommended waiting a few weeks before Amara visited her mother, wanting to get Denise stabilized on medication before introducing emotional variables. But when the day finally came, Amara was more nervous than she'd ever been in her life. The Whitmore Institute for Mental Health was nothing like the grim psychiatric hospitals depicted in movies. It looked more like a luxury resort, with manicured gardens, bright common areas, and staff who treated patients with dignity and respect. David and Emma accompanied Amara on her first visit, though they hung back when she entered the comfortable room where her mother was waiting. Denise looked different, cleaner, healthier, more present. Her hair had been washed and styled, she wore comfortable clothes that fit properly, and most importantly, her eyes were clear in a way Amara hadn't seen in years. "Mama," Amara said hesitantly. Denise looked up and smiled. A real smile, not the vacant expression or manic grin that had been her default for so long. "My baby girl," she said softly. "My beautiful, brilliant baby girl." Amara rushed into her mother's arms, both of them crying as years of pain and fear dissolved into relief and hope. "I'm sorry," Denise whispered into her daughter's hair. "I'm so sorry. I couldn't take care of you the way you deserved." "It's okay, Mama. We're both okay now." They talked for hours, really talked, in a way they hadn't been able to in years. Denise's memory was still imperfect, and there were moments when confusion clouded her eyes, but she was more herself than she'd been since Amara was small. "The nice doctor tells me you're living with a good family now," Denise said. "Going to a fancy school." Amara nodded. "Emma is my best friend. And Mr. Whitmore? He says I can stay as long as I want. He says he's proud to have me as part of his family." Denise took her daughter's hands. "You deserve that, baby. You deserve everything good this world has to offer." When it was time to leave, Denise pulled David aside. "I don't know why you chose to help us," she said, "but I want you to know that my daughter is special. Not just smart, special. She has a gift for seeing the good in people and bringing out the best in them." David nodded. "I've noticed. She's changed my daughter's life and mine." "Take care of her," Denise said, "and let her take care of you. That's what she does. She helps people become better than they thought they could be." Amara's academic excellence quickly became legendary at Riverside Academy. She wasn't just keeping up with her grade level, she was exceeding expectations at every turn. Her English essays were insightful beyond her years, her science projects were innovative, and her mathematical problem-solving abilities left teachers scrambling to find material challenging enough to engage her. But it was her impact on other students that truly impressed the faculty. Amara had a natural teaching ability that complemented her intelligence. She could explain complex concepts in ways that made them accessible, and she never made anyone feel stupid for not understanding something immediately. Emma wasn't her only success story. Marcus Chen, who had been struggling with algebra, found new confidence after Amara showed him how to visualize equations spatially. Sarah Williams discovered a love for literature when Amara helped her understand the deeper meanings in the novels they were reading. Even some of the older students began seeking her help. "She's extraordinary," Principal Foster told David during a parent-teacher conference. "In all my years in education, I've rarely seen a student with such natural intelligence combined with genuine empathy. She could have her pick of any university when the time comes." David smiled. "She's taught my daughter that being smart isn't something to be ashamed of." For the first time, Emma is proud of her academic achievements. Indeed, Emma had blossomed under Amara's influence. Her grades had improved dramatically, but more importantly, she'd developed confidence in her abilities and genuine enthusiasm for learning. The girl who had once hidden behind the school building to cry over poor test scores was now volunteering to give presentations and asking thoughtful questions in class. Their friendship had deepened beyond tutoring into genuine sisterhood. They shared everything: dreams, fears, inside jokes, and the comfortable silences that come with true understanding. "Do you think people will always see me as the charity case?" Amara asked one evening as they worked on homework together. Emma looked up from her history textbook. "Who cares what people think? You're not a charity case, you're my sister, and you're the smartest person I know." Amara smiled. "Sister," she repeated softly. "I like the sound of that." "Good, because you're stuck with me now," Emma replied with a grin. 2 years had passed since that first meeting under the oak tree, and the transformation in both girls was remarkable. Emma had grown into a confident, compassionate young woman who used her privilege to advocate for others. Amara had flourished academically while maintaining the humility and kindness that made her such an effective teacher. Denise's progress had been slower but steady. The combination of proper medication, therapy, and the knowledge that her daughter was safe and thriving had worked something approaching a miracle. She still had difficult days, but they were the exception rather than the rule. David had been as good as his word, treating Amara not as a project or a symbol, but as a daughter. He'd legally adopted her the previous year, a decision that had surprised no one who knew the family. Amara had kept her mother's surname as her middle name, Amara Johnson Whitmore, honoring both her past and her future. The Whitmore Foundation, David's charitable organization, had established a scholarship program for academically gifted children from disadvantaged backgrounds. Amara had helped design the selection criteria, insisting that the program look beyond test scores to identify children who showed not just intelligence, but the potential to lift others along with them. On a warm spring afternoon, Amara found herself back under the oak tree where her new life had begun. But this time, she wasn't hiding behind a fence or stealing moments of education. She was officially tutoring 3 younger students who were struggling with their coursework. "Remember," she told them, echoing something Emma had said to her long ago, "you're not slow or stupid. You just learn differently than other people, and that's okay. My job is to help you find the way that works best for you." Emma joined them as the session was ending, flopping down under the tree with the casual grace of someone completely comfortable in her own skin. "How'd it go?" she asked. "Really well," Amara replied. Jenny finally understood fractions, and both Marcus and David made breakthrough progress with their reading comprehension. Emma nodded. "Dad wants to know if you're ready for the foundation dinner tomorrow night. There's going to be press coverage, and he wants to make sure you're comfortable with that." Amara considered this. The Whitmore Foundation was announcing a major expansion of its educational programs, and as the inspiration for many of these initiatives, she would inevitably be part of the story. "I'm ready," she said finally. "If sharing my story helps other kids get the chances I got, then it's worth it." Emma smiled. "Remember when you told me that rich kids and poor kids don't mix?" Amara laughed. "I was wrong about a lot of things back then." "Not about the important stuff," Emma replied. "You always knew that everyone deserves a chance to learn, to grow, to become their best self. You just didn't know how to make that happen yet." As the sun set behind the oak tree, both girls reflected on how far they'd come. Amara was no longer the homeless child peering through windows at an education she couldn't access. Emma was no longer the privileged girl who felt stupid despite every advantage. They were sisters now in every way that mattered, bound together not by blood or circumstance, but by a friendship that had transformed them both. The foundation dinner was held at Detroit's most prestigious hotel, with hundreds of guests including politicians, business leaders, and philanthropists. David took the podium to announce the expansion of educational programs that would help thousands of underprivileged children access quality education. But the most powerful moment came when he called Amara to the stage. She wore a simple blue dress that Emma had helped her pick out, and she walked to the microphone with the poise of someone who had learned to carry herself with dignity, regardless of circumstances. "2 years ago I was homeless," she began, her voice clear and strong. "My mother and I lived on the streets, and my only education came from listening through windows and begging for scraps of knowledge wherever I could find them." The room was completely silent. "I want you to know that I'm not here tonight as a symbol or a feel-good story. I'm here as proof that every child, regardless of their circumstances, has something valuable to offer the world. The question isn't whether they deserve our help. The question is whether we're wise enough to recognize the gifts they bring." She talked about Emma, about how their unlikely friendship had taught both of them that true wealth comes from lifting each other up. She talked about her mother, whose illness didn't diminish her worth as a human being. She talked about the other children still living in the shadows, still peering through windows at opportunities they couldn't access. "Education isn't just about individual success," she concluded. "It's about building a world where every child's potential can be realized, where every voice can be heard, where every dream has a chance to become reality. That's the world Emma and I are working toward, and we hope you'll join us." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Later, as the family rode home together, David turned to both girls. "I'm proud of you both," he said, "not just for what you've accomplished, but for who you've become." Amara leaned back in her seat, watching the city lights blur past the window. She thought about the little girl who used to sleep on cardboard and dream of sitting in a real classroom. That girl could never have imagined this life, this family, these opportunities. But she also thought about all the children still out there, still dreaming, still hoping for someone to see their potential. Her work was just beginning. "Emma," she said quietly, "do you remember what you asked me that first day under the tree?" Emma smiled. "I asked if you'd help me with school. And I said I didn't want money." "I remember." Amara took her sister's hand. "I still don't want money. I want something much more valuable." "What's that?" Amara looked out at the city where she'd once been invisible, where she was now someone who could make a difference. "I want every child to have what we have, someone who believes in them, someone who sees their worth, someone who refuses to let them disappear." Emma squeezed her hand. "Then that's what we'll do." David smiled as he listened to his daughters planning their future. He had thought he was rescuing one homeless girl, but she had ended up rescuing his entire family, teaching them lessons about privilege, responsibility, and the true meaning of wealth. 5 years after that first meeting under the oak tree, Amara stood before the graduating class of Riverside Academy as valedictorian. At 17, she had already been accepted to Harvard, MIT, and Stanford, with full scholarships to each. But her speech wasn't about personal achievement. It was about collective responsibility. "We are the privileged few," she told her classmates, many of whom had known her story from the beginning. "Not just because of our family's wealth, but because we've had access to education, mentorship, and opportunities that millions of children will never see. The question each of us must answer is this: what will we do with that privilege?" Emma, now co-valedictorian alongside her sister, smiled from the audience where she sat with David and Denise. Denise had been stable enough to move into a supervised living facility the year before, and while she still had difficult days, she was present for all the important moments in her daughter's life. After the ceremony, the family gathered under their oak tree one more time before Amara left for college. The tree had grown taller and stronger over the years, its branches now wide enough to shelter a dozen people in its shade. "I keep thinking about all the other Amaras out there," Emma said, lying on her back and looking up through the leaves. "The kids who are brilliant but invisible, who have so much to offer but no way to show it." Amara nodded. "That's why the Foundation is expanding the mobile education program. We can't wait for children to find schools. We need to bring education to them." The Whitmore Foundation had indeed grown far beyond its original scope. What had started as a scholarship program had evolved into a comprehensive initiative that included mobile classrooms, mentorship programs, family support services, and mental health resources. Amara had been instrumental in designing many of these programs, drawing from her own experience to identify gaps in traditional approaches. "I've been thinking," David said, joining them under the tree. "The Foundation needs someone to head up the street outreach program, someone who understands what it's like to live on the margins, but who also has the education and skills to develop effective interventions." Amara looked at him carefully. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a calling," David replied. "Harvard will wait. This work can't." Emma sat up suddenly. "What if we both took a gap year? You could start the outreach program, and I could work on expanding the tutoring initiatives. We could spend the year really understanding what works and what doesn't before we go to college." Amara felt a familiar flutter of possibility in her chest, the same feeling she'd had years ago when she first dared to dream of sitting in a real classroom. But this dream was bigger. This dream was about ensuring that no child would have to peer through windows at an education they couldn't access. "What does Mom think?" Amara asked, looking toward Denise. Denise had been quiet during the conversation, but now she spoke with the clarity that had become more common as her treatment progressed. "I think my daughter was put on this earth to help people find their way out of dark places. If that's what you feel called to do, then that's what you should do." The first Whitmore Foundation mobile classroom hit the streets of Detroit 6 months later. It was a converted bus equipped with computers, books, whiteboards, and most importantly, teachers who understood that education meant more than just academics. This services had assisted countless parents in overcoming barriers to their children's success. But perhaps most importantly, they had created a model that other organizations were replicating and adapting to their own communities. The ripple effect of that first conversation under an oak tree had spread far beyond anything they could have imagined. "Are you ready for this?" Emma asked, looking at the new facility that had been built on the land adjacent to Riverside Academy. The Amara Whitmore Center for Educational Equity would serve as headquarters for the Foundation's expanded operations, but more importantly, it would house a demonstration school designed specifically for children who had been failed by traditional educational systems. "I don't know if anyone's ever ready to open a school," Amara replied, "but I know we've learned enough to try." The school was designed around principles they had discovered through years of working with marginalized children. Classes were small and flexible. Teachers were trained in trauma-informed practices. Academic instruction was combined with social-emotional learning, life skills development, and mental health support. Most importantly, the school operated on the principle that every child brought valuable knowledge and experience to the learning community. Students weren't seen as empty vessels to be filled with information, but as whole human beings with stories, strengths, and perspectives that enriched everyone's education. David watched his daughters with pride as they walked through the new facility. At 52, he had learned that the most important business he would ever be involved in was the business of human potential. The technology companies he owned continued to generate wealth, but the foundation work generated meaning. "Your mother would be so proud," he told Amara, as they stood in the school's library, which bore Denise's name on a plaque near the entrance. Denise had passed away the previous winter, her body finally succumbing to years of untreated illness and life on the streets. But she had lived to see her daughter graduate from Harvard, to see the first mobile classroom serve its 1,000th student, to see Amara recognized as a rising leader in educational advocacy. "She is proud," Amara corrected gently. "She's watching and she's proud." 25 years after a homeless 12-year-old girl first peered through a fence at Riverside Academy, Dr. Amara Whitmore sat under the oak tree grading papers. At 37, she was the head of the most innovative educational program in the country, a sought-after speaker, and an advocate whose work had changed policies at the state and federal level. Emma, now director of the Whitmore Foundation, joined her sister under their tree as she did most afternoons when she wasn't traveling to foundation sites around the world. "How was your day?" Emma asked, settling onto the bench that had been installed under the oak tree several years earlier. "Exhausting and exhilarating," Amara replied, closing her laptop. "We had 3 new students start today. One of them reminds me a lot of myself at that age. Brilliant but guarded, hungry for knowledge but afraid to hope for too much." Emma nodded. "Did you tell her your story?" "Not yet. I'll wait until she's ready to hear it. But I did tell her what someone once told me, that every child belongs somewhere and sometimes it just takes time to find where that somewhere is." They sat in comfortable silence, watching current students from both Riverside Academy and the Amara Whitmore Center for Educational Equity mingling on the playground. The integration between the two schools had been gradual but successful, creating an educational environment where children from all backgrounds learned together. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if that security guard had chased you away that first day?" Emma asked. Amara considered this. "I think about it sometimes, but I've learned that when someone is determined to change their life, opportunities have a way of presenting themselves. Maybe it wouldn't have been Riverside Academy. Maybe it wouldn't have been you. But I think I would have found a way eventually." Emma smiled. "Always the optimist. Always the realist," Amara corrected. "I've seen too many children overcome impossible odds to believe that circumstances determine destiny. Circumstances matter, absolutely, but they're not everything." As the afternoon sun filtered through the leaves of the oak tree, both women reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The little girl, who had once hidden in the grass to listen to lessons, now created curriculum that was used in schools across the nation. The privileged child, who had once cried behind the gymnasium, now ran programs that had helped thousands of children access opportunities they never would have had otherwise. But perhaps most importantly, they had created something that transcended individual success, a model for how privilege could be used responsibly, how friendship could bridge any divide. and how education could be a force for justice rather than just advancement. The oak tree continued to grow, its branches reaching ever wider, its roots growing ever deeper, sheltering new generations of dreamers who dared to believe that their circumstances didn't have to define their futures. And under its shade, the work continued, one child, one family, one community at a time. In the distance, the mobile classroom could be seen making its evening rounds, carrying hope to corners of the city where it was needed most. Inside that bus, a new generation of teachers shared knowledge with a new generation of students, all of them connected by the belief that education was not a privilege to be hoarded, but a right to be shared. The circle was complete, but the story continued. Under the oak tree, hope had taken root and grown into something beautiful and lasting, a testament to what was possible when people chose to see potential instead of problems, when they chose love over indifference, when they chose to act on the radical belief that every child deserved a chance to shine. And in classrooms and communities across the country, other oak trees were being planted, other seeds of hope were taking root, other stories of transformation were beginning. Because hope, once planted, has a way of spreading far beyond its original soil, carried on the wind to places where it's needed most, taking root wherever it finds fertile ground and patient hearts willing to tend it. The oak tree stood as a silent witness to it all, to the power of friendship, the importance of seeing beyond surfaces, and the truth that sometimes the most profound changes begin with the simplest acts of kindness. Under its branches, two girls had found each other, and in doing so, had found a way to change the world.